Well, last night, President Donald Trump held his first State of the Union address as Commander-in-Chief in the United States. The speech, well, left many unanswered questions, including a lot of criticism. Here now to break this down and a whole lot more is our political analyst, Lee Bynes. And Lee, good to have you.
Good to be back.
It's the morning after, and a lot of questions still looming out of Washington, D.C., particularly when it comes to the President's State of the Union speech. Talking about making America great again, but yet and still on the hearts and minds of Democrats, they feel as though the president didn't answer a lot of questions.
You know, it's funny that you would frame it that way, because that's kind of like the take I took on it. I've always been of the mind that when it comes to politicians, it's just as important as to what they didn't say as to what they did say. And so when I observed the speech, I started writing down things that I wasn't hearing. And when you're talking about the State of the Union, we're talking about more than just the economy. We're talking about more than just the stock market and its meteoric rise. Firstly, as far as those two items are concerned, and he's hanging his hat on, a lot of those things were in the mix before he came on board. As far when he started talking about African Americans being, having the lowest employment rate in history. We have to look back and see the trajectory of that was going down during the Obama administration. So when I started doing was taking down notes, and I came up with some pretty interesting items. And one of the things that when you start considering the State of the Union is, what's the state of race relations in America right now? And he did not address that. When we're talking about the S-hole remarks, when we're talking about take a knee protests, when we're talking about what happened in Charlottesville and beyond. Those are major issues that are still unresolved in this country, and he's been behind a lot of that, the stoking of that red meat type of activity. The second thing is, what's the state of income inequality? That is a huge issue right now, and the president didn't even touch that. Outside of the fact that a lot of jobs are coming in, but a lot of those jobs are not going to offer a living wage, let alone a low minimum wage. And so when we get to us talking about one of the most important things that we mentioned, he didn't have a word to say on climate change. Why is that important? Because people have already forgotten about what happened in Florida, what happened in Puerto Rico, what happened in Texas. People are not even thinking anymore about what happened in California with the wildfires and the mudslides that followed it. And the reason why I say that that's important, because the United States spent $306 billion in terms of money that it took to rescue these people, try and find some way to rebuild, and et cetera. So when you consider the fact that that the United States, FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, only has an annual budget of $13 billion, then spending $306 billion in 1 year shows you that ignoring or denying climate change as an issue.
We heard yesterday
is a problem. Certainly.
And we heard yesterday him use it for reference again, making America great, talking about making America great. Most people are worried about the economy, manufacturing jobs. How do you think he addressed the issue of the economy and improving?
Well, he took credit for it all. I mean, if it wasn't for Donald Trump, again, the stock market would be huge. The stock market wouldn't be as big as it right now. If it wasn't for his tax cuts, he would the American people wouldn't have all of these high-paying jobs with great benefits supposedly coming. Now there has been an uptick in jobs. There has been an uptick in some of the major corporations offering bonuses to their employees. But I would say hold off on that. Wait and see whether or not these bonuses are going to come next year. What we have to understand and we have to keep in mind is that the tax cuts that the corporations got, they are permanent. The tax cuts that, or the pittance that the middle class or below that have gotten are temporary. So before we put too much stock in the fact that these companies are supposedly doing the right thing by their employees and sharing the wealth, if you will, we have to understand that this could be a one-off type of situation, and based upon this president, I wouldn't doubt that that would probably be the case.
When we talk about economy, I want to also talk not just about the speech, but I want to talk about shutdown. Now, you were here on the show before.
Absolutely.
And we talked about the shutdown, and I did say that it probably would not happen. You said it would happen, and it did. But now we also face another possibility with the shutdown looming in about 8 days.
I would say that it's not only possible, but it's probable, because since the last shutdown, the sides have hardened. The Democrats on the left of the aisle and their progressives that they have to satisfy, they are not going to accept the fact that what the Trump administration is proposing with regards to DACA, which we propose to chain migration, and the visa lottery program. They're going to hold firm on that, and they're also going to hold firm on the fact that they're not going to want to fund that wall. I mean, it is a non-starter at this point. On the other side of the ledger, we're talking about the Republicans, and they're saying that this whole concept of offering amnesty to nearly 2 million undocumented people is a non-starter for them. So I don't see that gap closing whatsoever. So we're, unless anything changes miraculously over the next couple of days, we'll be looking at another shutdown.
Lee Bonds, our political analyst, and he joins us now in studio, and he's talking a little bit about the President's State of the Union address, and not just only the President's State of the Union address, but right now addressing the issue of a possible government shutdown that is looming possibly 8 days away. Now, Lee, let me ask you this. If the government does shut down, what does that mean basically for Americans?
Well, I'm going to tell you right now, the bean counters have already come up with the fact that it costs $6 billion a week. That's what it costs to run this country in a shutdown mode. Now, you take 3 weeks, that's $18 billion. There's the wall right there, you see. Mm-hmm. So, no, there's going to be a significant blowback. Quite frankly, I'm thinking on both sides of the aisle if this happens, and I would recommend, as an analyst, as a strategist from the left side of the aisle, in the interest of full disclosure, that the Democrats would be well served if they would add a little something, another brick on that load, and the brick that would probably get them a lot of mileage and keep a lot more people on their side during this upcoming shutdown would be to address the U.S. defense budget. We're talking about almost $750 billion. $1 trillion for the 2018 budget alone. Donald Trump has requested, and it looks like he's going to get $80 billion increase in the military budget. Now, if you look at this globally, that nearly a third of $1 trillion being spent covers the defense budgets for the next 12 countries. Not only that, Russia's entire annual budget for defense is $80 billion. So if the Democrats had any sense and was thinking strategically, they would know that that's the issue to hang on the Republicans and get them to reduce that in order to bring more social programs to Americans.
Well, we're hearing out of North Korea the possibility of showing off missiles before the Winter Olympics. Some people have great concern about that, saying the U.S. needs to be adequately armed, given the fact of what we're seeing in North Korea. The president saying, listen, we need to increase money, make it more relevant, and increase our missile operation. You talked about Democrats having a voice. What would be the message the Democrats should be sending in the wake of all of this?
Well, you know what? Again, it goes back to how much they're spending. I don't think, if you could raise it to $1 trillion a year, and that will not deter the North Koreans from moving forward on their defense of utilizing nuclear weapons to keep the United States at bay. Again, this is old news. The North Koreans saw what happened in Libya. They saw what happened with Saddam Hussein in Iraq. As far as they're concerned, a nuclear arsenal is the only thing that will make sure that the United States keep their distance, and they're not going to stop. But if that's the measure that the United States is going to use to continue the escalation in the military budget, then we're going to be spending a lot of money, and there's going to be a lot of poor folks walking around here wondering where their next meal is going to come, because the social network, and that's one of the other issues that wasn't mentioned, is that the America's, what's the state of America's social safety net? And we're talking about seniors, we're talking about the young, we're talking about educating our youth. And if all of those issues are, well, none of those issues can be appropriately addressed as long as we're spending nearly $1 trillion a year for defense. Mm-hmm. And who is our enemy at this stage that would warrant or justify those kind of numbers? And one other point I'd like to mention is that as far as the military budget is concerned, with all of this money that we've spent, we've been in Afghanistan for almost 2 decades right now. We're spending a ton of money on a monthly basis to keep that operation going. And if you notice the last week, just 1 week alone, there's been so many bombings and killings in Afghanistan, specifically the capital, Kabul, which is the most, supposedly the most secure city in the nation. And the Taliban is pretty much running wild. So where that money is going, how it's being spent, whether it's being spent effectively or not, is an open question, and Americans could use a lot of answers to figure out why.
Lee Bonds, that's why we bring you here every week. Bring us the news and information in the world of politics. Thanks so much, Lee.
That's my pleasure.
All right, listen, taking a quick break. We'll be back with more shows. Stay with us. Got more coming up right after this.